Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we have our DFS episode of the week. Going to be breaking down the DraftKings main slate on Sunday, cash tournament games alike. As always, I am joined by none other than PFF analyst, the prop prophet himself, Andrew Erickson. Andrew, how you do, my friend?
Doing good, man. Halloween's coming up. My favorite holiday. Gonna get some candy in me. I cannot wait, but I'm looking forward to this slate. Again, there's less games on it, so it's kind of easier to go through the players. And I know that when I sent you over the show sheet, you're like, Andrew, like, you need to limit your players. I'm like, dude, I just want to play all the guys. Like, I'm just excited about a lot of different plays this week. And that's the thing you remember, you know, if you can't decide between two players, like, who are you excited to play? It's like, do you really want to play Mike Davis? I know he pops in the projections sometimes, but it's like, come on, like, do you really want to play him? It's like, get excited about who you're playing.
So, yeah, you sent me like 8 cash game wide receivers, and at first I was like, what the fuck, man? But then I looked at it a little more after going through the slate myself, and I actually ended up having a big group as well. So I see where you were coming from. My apologies for that. But Andrew, before we get going, you said you've been having a great day, and I really was too, until I just got overtaken by a particular something that a member of the national media, one of the main reporters in the NFL that is not named Adam Schefter, said. Appearing on Pat McAfee's show, none other than Mr. Ian Rapoport stated, unless I'm literally crazy, Baker Mayfield is the future starting QB of the Cleveland Browns. Fine, whatever. Then Rapoport continued, he's probably the 8th or 9th best quarterback in the NFL. Andrew, my problem with this isn't even necessarily like putting Baker in a top tier of quarterbacks. I think you maybe could squeeze him top 12, that seems pretty tough. I think top 15, top 16, you're probably going to find a way to put him there. Maybe. Rap Sheet didn't say that, though. He didn't say he's a top 15 quarterback. He said 8th or 9th. Andrew, did he spend an hour last night ranking the quarterbacks and come away with this as a good idea? Like, I can't get this through my head, man. And it's been bothering me for the last hour and a half how you can go on here and say 8th or 9th. You thought this through? You really thought that, what? We can name like probably 12 of them without a problem, Andrew. I just don't get this, man. Can you talk me through this? Because this is bothering me very much.
Hey, man, at least he didn't tell people to drop Saquon Barkley in their fantasy football leagues. I think that's the number one thing that he did not do. But I know that we talked before we got started here. You can rattle off 10 names before we come to Baker Mayfield.
Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson. Like, there's 9 that should leave absolutely no stones unturned. Like, how do you come to 8th or 9th here? Again, I get it. If you haven't had your coffee, you're just like, oh, he could be a top 10 quarterback at some point. Like, no, that's wrong, but that's also saying something off the cuff. This man came prepared, Andrew, and he settled on 8th or 9th. That's what I have a problem with.
Maybe he's did it in a certain context of, you know, when he's looking like 4 to 5 years in the future and there's no Tom Brady, and I mean, maybe Tom Brady's still playing, who knows? Yeah, it's really tough to get behind that. I know like in the offseason I had like a bold prediction that Baker Mayfield could be like a top 5 like fantasy quarterback, and that's why it was bold. Like, it's because it was very little likelihood that it was actually going to happen. So for him to just kind of blatantly state, oh yeah, 8th or 9th best quarterback, and kind of off the cuff, seems just a little bit like a stretch that maybe he's in Baker Mayfield's camp, like trying to get this guy to a long-term deal, because right now what he's put on the field this year, dealing with the injuries, he is not deserving of a extension. So it looks like he's going to go into his 5th year. And so far, the quarterbacks that we've seen go into their 5th year, most recently Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, like, things did not pan out well for those folks. So yeah, better days hopefully are ahead for Baker, but right now it's not looking so good.
And if you wanted to say Baker Mayfield was a top 8 or 9 quarterback from week 7 to week 17 in the year 2020, you'd probably be correct. But we're not doing that. Like, Aaron Rodgers ranks outside the top 10 quarterbacks this season in basically any passing metric you want to look at. PFF passing grade, yards per attempt, QB rating, and adjusted completion rate. Like, pick your favorite metric. He's probably not a top 10 quarterback. Can we really look anyone in the eye and say Aaron Rodgers is anything other than a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the league? Of course you can't. So just get that out of here with that rap sheet pissing me off on this lovely Thursday afternoon. But Andrew, let's get back to the actual purpose of this show, which is to try to win these people some money playing the good old American pastime known as DFS. So kicking things off with the cash lineup. For those that don't know, we're talking about head-to-heads, 50-50 games. We are trying to basically beat one person or just finish in the top half of the field, not necessarily trying to do anything too crazy, too contrarian to gain a big edge in tournaments, because we don't need to gain a big edge. We just need to set the floor as high high as possible. So, Andrew, I know we've just been riding the Jalen Hurts train week after week, and it hasn't let us down. And I'm not against doing that this week. I just guess my question for you, why go Jalen Hurts at 6,900 when we can move up for the small price of $500 to get to Lamar Jackson?
I mean, Jalen Hurts has yet to miss five. I mean, he has more quarterback one finishes this year than Lamar Jackson does. Did Lamar Jackson finish as a quarterback one last week? He did not.
Okay, Andrew, but take your smart ass cap off for a second and continue.
He did not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Jalen Hurts is my banky. Like I need him in my cash games. I'm 0-3 in the weeks that he doesn't play. So I need Jalen Hurts in my cash lineups. I mean, the guy's just super safe floor. He is cheaper than Lamar Jackson, like you mentioned. But I mean, the rushing equity, 50 rushing yards per game, is second to only Lamar Jackson. He scored at least 21 DraftKings fantasy points in every game he's played this year. He's been a top 12 quarterback in every single game that he's played fully in his NFL career. 9 starts, 9 top 12 quarterback finishes. So yeah, I mean, I get if you have the salary to move up to Lamar, I think that does make sense. Lamar is the better real life quarterback and still the better fantasy football quarterback in my opinion. But on a week to week basis, salary is tight. Times are tough, man. Like you don't always have an unlimited salary to move up $500 to get Lamar Jackson. So I don't like to overthink it. It's worked basically every single time we've talked about Jalen Hurts. And I know that maybe you don't want to necessarily watch the game that Hurts is playing in and just kind of like, all right, well, he's got 21 fantasy points. That's all I need. I'm good to go. Because we know that the way that he gets there sometimes isn't always the prettiest.
Lamar, $500 more. I have Lamar as my QB3, Hurts as my QB5. They're both very good options. I don't really see anywhere else you can go with cash this week. I think Derek Carr at 6K is the absolute cheapest you can go. And I mean, if you can see my facial expression, maybe YouTubers out there can, I'm not feeling particularly good about that. So it really isn't a cheap option you can, rest your hat on and all that this week. And I don't think you need to go all the way up to Kyler at 8,500, Mahomes at 8,400, when we can save literally 1,500 going down to Hurts or Lamar. So whichever way you want to go there with our two best cheat code versions of rushing quarterbacks, particularly as long as Kyler continues to have this under the radar shoulder injury, I do think that makes the most sense to start off the cash lineup. We can't fade Derrick Henry at this point. The guy is getting 30 touches a week. There's just not another running back on this slate that we can really get behind with that. There's no McCaffrey. There's no Kamara because he's playing on Monday night. Aaron Jones is the second highest price back at $7,500. Full, nearly $2,000 difference between those two guys. So I think jamming in Henry is more than plausible this week. After that, Andrew, it's just hard to get off of Darrell Henderson in this smash spot. 17, I believe, point favorites at home against the Lions. Just put in Henderson. He's still too cheap relative to the role he has right now.
Yeah, man, he's got a 3-down workhorse role in this offense, so he should be at least 7K, 7.5K. I mean, he has a better role than Aaron Jones does. I get, we love Aaron Jones for his dynamic ability, but he's still kind of in a timeshare with A.J. Dillon. It's a fact, and that's why Aaron Jones hasn't really had these monster weeks. I mean, he's still a top 6 running back overall this season because he had a massive game against the Lions earlier, but he's been pretty middling production the last couple of weeks. I mean, he's been super efficient, and he had, I think, averaged 7 yards per carry either last week or the week before because that's just how good he is. But A.J. Dillon is working in and taking away enough touches where you want to pay down and get Henderson, who is the clear workhorse. They don't use any other running back. He's basically taken on that Todd Gurley role. I mean, he's 6th in expected fantasy points per game this year, 3rd in expected fantasy points the last couple of weeks. It's just a role that you cannot beat, and he's just going to keep going up in price. I don't know why he's still priced down in the 6.6 when he's seeing a role that deserves 7.5 or even 8K, like a McCaffrey, Dalvin. I mean, he's the closest thing to those guys right now.
I think you could rank Henderson number 2 this week, just among all running backs, period. I believe, friend of the show, and he's on here at fucking 3 times a week, Dre McFarland does have Henderson as his RB2 in this spot. So, yeah, I just think that 6,600 price tag, far too cheap. Not only can, we didn't bring up the Lions. He has the best matchup imaginable, too. The role is what makes it so egregious to begin with. So, we got Lamar, Hurts, Henry, Henderson. Are you filling that flex spot with another running back? I know we have Miles Sanders sitting there at 5,100, but I don't want Miles Sanders on this squad, Andrew. I get Jalen Hurts has enough rush attempts and fourth quarter goodness for him to maybe overcome this letdown spot in Vegas. With Miles Sanders, I know some of the usage is moving the right way. I know 5,100 is a bit of a slap in the face, but just straight up between Miles and Mike Davis and Miles and Devontae Booker, who only cost $400 more, I think I'd rank Miles behind at least Booker and probably behind Mike Davis too, the more I think about it.
You really play those guys over Miles Sanders?
What? So we can get 2 carries from Miles Sanders again? Davis has at least 15 touches in every game this year, and he has a better matchup.
I don't think the matchup is bad. I think that the matchup is pretty solid. I mean, you look at the Raiders, they're tied with the Texans, 29th in the league in explosive rushes allowed this year. So, I mean, if Miles Sanders was playing the Texans' run defense, we would be up in arms like, you got to play this guy. And according to at least looking at explosive rushes allowed, the Raiders are in the same boat as the Houston Texans. So I guess that's kind of my take on it. I think that the matchup is really good. The last 4 weeks, they've allowed the 6th most rushing yards to running backs. And Miles Sanders, his usage has gone up. He saw almost all of the touches in the running backfield last week, 11 out of 12. Yeah, it wasn't much, but
11. That's my point. I know his usage is good relative to this Eagles backfield. Kenneth Gainwell isn't an issue, but how are we only hitting 11 touches on 83% snap rate, man?
I mean, I think that Miles Sanders can get more yards on 11 touches than Mike Davis can get on 18. I mean, Miles Sanders is explosive. That's what I mean. I think there's a little bit of upside baked in with him that Booker and Mike Davis don't have from a yardage standpoint. I think that he can break off bigger runs.
I don't think Mike Davis needs to be in here in a cash game. That's not necessarily my argument. I'm saying, why is Miles the one we want to finish this out with? I think there's maybe wide receivers we could have more fun with, or get up to Devontae Booker, where we're definitely crushing that snap potential, and we actually have a home situation where maybe he builds some positive game script. I just don't really see. I don't know why this is the week we're assuming Miles Sanders gets back to being anything other than a freaking RB3. I guess that's the main point here.
I think that the usage over the last 2 weeks is good. If it had been more middling, it was more Kenneth Gainwell the last couple of weeks. I mean, it seems like they're going away from Kenneth Gainwell, so at least I'm chasing that optimism that Sanders is getting more involved in the offense, that he will continue to be more involved against the Las Vegas Raiders, who I think is a good matchup. But so if there's another, we'll talk about wide receivers. So you're thinking about leaning more towards going 4 wide receivers in cash than doing the 3 running backs, because it would either be Sanders, Davis, or a Booker as that third guy, probably.
I think I'm leaning towards getting up to Booker if I can and stacking him with the Giants defense special teams at just 2,500, because then we get that little correlation there with the running back in our defense. And, Booker, I know he let people down last week, but his usage was honestly even better than we could have really anticipated. So if we do that, I mean, I guess we can stack Sanders in the Eagles defense, but I just think the Raiders, they let us down 2 of the last 3 weeks, but we want to talk, if we want to just play off of what have you done for me lately storylines, I just think the Raiders are much better than the Eagles here. I could see this being another week where Sanders eats into the total rates and everything, but at the end of the day, we're looking at a guy getting 8 to 10 touches. I don't know. It feels like a trap, Andrew. I need that GIF saying, it's a trap. That's what Miles Sanders feels like to me this week. I see where, hey, the guy has those 80-yard chunk runs in his potential range of outcomes. We just haven't seen it. Him and Chase Edmonds, it is ridiculous. It's I think Edmonds is at 82 touches. Sanders is at 78. They haven't scored a touchdown. You need to go all the way under 30 touches to find the next highest used player that hasn't found the end zone this year. So he's due. But man, oh man, Andrew, just saying he's due in cash is just where I guess I get scared. I'm trying to find the safest guy possible for this spot, and Miles Sanders is not the definition of safe. I guess that's all I'm saying. What about I guess Michael, I agree with you. Michael Carter is a better tournament play. So Miles Sanders, if we think he's going to be, I guess the one point is if we think he's going to be chalky enough that it might not matter in cash, everyone else is rostering Miles Sanders, take that 5,100 and move on. Because I guess the kryptonite to my argument here, Andrew, is that there really isn't anyone cheaper that I feel better about with Sanders. And if we go through this lineup a little more, those extra few $100 could prove to be a little bit problematic. So Sanders, I do think getting up to Booker is preferred. But yeah, if you want to fill out that flex spot, those are probably the guys you're going to have to look at getting up to Henry, Henderson, Lamar, Hurts, and elsewhere. Now, because we're taking some discounts at these positions, we can get up to Devontae Adams at 8,900. I went ahead and I looked at his performances over the past 2 years, actually, when he hasn't. Let me find the exact stat for you guys. It was basically just a bounce back trend from Devontae, and it has been massive. Okay, last 10 bounce back performances following a non-injury game where he failed to score a touchdown. Spoiler, he went over 100 yards and scored a touchdown in all but 2 of these games, or 3 of these games. The only ones that didn't qualify. He had either 100 yards or a touchdown. So Devontae, I know we got Tyreek there, but when Tyreek is playing as banged up as he is, I just think that the way that Tyreek always splits the passing game with Kelsey, I just got to give Devontae the hat tip more weeks than not if it's at all close salary-wise, which it is in this case. So, Andrew, I think you're with me on Devontae. What are you feeling with these next two wide receiver spots?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Devontae is just he's so locked and loaded, especially because the matchup is here. Like last week, the matchup wasn't really that great. The Bears, it was kind of like a slog matchup where you didn't really expect, they didn't need to do a lot. And I mean, he came close to catching a touchdown last week anyway. Like he was close, but I mean, 34% target share, 34% target rate per route run, number one in the NFL in both categories. It's just, he's just so involved in this offense, and Aaron Rodgers could not get enough of Devontae Adams. So I could not agree more. Other receivers that I like in terms of like cash, I mean, I think Sterling Shepard is pretty locked and loaded towards, seeing volume. Like Kadarius Toney's not practicing, Kenny Galladay's not practicing. We've seen Sterling Shepard basically get double-digit targets every single game he's played this year in full, and this trend goes back to every time he's played with Daniel Jones. Like he's always seen double-digit target and so much volume in this offense. So Sterling Shepard seems like he's locked and loaded. And then, I mean, I like Tyler Boyd. It sounds kind of gross because Tyler Boyd's just been not consistent whatsoever. He's not been getting a lot of targets in this offense, but he's still running a lot of routes on the team. And this is a matchup that really favors the Cincinnati slot receiver. Like the Ravens have been kind of a slot funnel defense. They rank dead last in yards after the catch, 22nd in completions to targets up in the slot. So, and if you look at the wide receiver quarterback matchup chart, Boyd has the best matchup. And this is something I've been kind of leaning on a little bit more when we have like these trios of receivers. Like whenever I have to rank like the Bucs receivers, I'm like, okay, like here we go. Like, all right, do I just rank them all 1, 2, 3, like back to back to back? Because it's really tough to figure it out. So I try to lean on the wide receiver cornerback matchup chart or like target rate per route run to kind of just get an idea of a tiebreaker in. And Boyd does have the best matchup out of the slot. So I think Burrow could target him a little bit more. And we know Boyd's talented. Like he's not going to just continue to see like 2 or 3 targets every single week. So I think this could be a week where targets go back to him. If you have the extra money, I think that you could go up to Higgins at 4,900 a little bit more. But because T. Higgins does lead the team in targets the last 2 weeks since he came back. So I think that that's something that's kind of underrated. He just has not turned that into production. So those are some of the receivers I'm looking at in like the 5K to 4K range.
Yeah, the big area where I think we need to save money is, and this is, I guess, another reason why I like Lamar Jackson. If we want to stack these guys, I do think the Lamar Jackson, Rashod Bateman play makes a lot of sense together. Bateman, just 3,400. Like, we have Sammy Watkins priced this week at 4,500, and Bateman is playing the Sammy Watkins role. So, like, I know, Andrew, like, you're much higher on Bateman, like, season long, I think even Dynasty than I am. But, hey, this is just more of a volume play here. Rashod Bateman is the number 2 wide receiver for Ravens offense, passing the ball more, in a matchup where I agree with you. I do think the Bengals have a chance to have plenty of success themselves, make this more of a 60-minute game instead of 45 minutes in a blowout, like we've seen some of these past Ravens-Bengals games turn into. So, having Bateman there, like, if we can get those 5 or 6 targets we had last week, I think he can make the most of that and meet that 3,400 spot. Yeah, and there's just really a lot of wide receivers in that 4-5K range. Again, comes back to my earlier apology about you listing a lot of these guys, but Waddle 5.6, Godwin 5.9, Jacoby 5.3, Shepard, I believe as you mentioned at 5.6K. You just got to try to find your path there. Even Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4.1K, I think is probably about the cheapest you can go aside from Bateman.
Well, there's also, I would just admit, like Dante Pettis too. If the Giants don't have their, he saw 10 targets last week and he's 3K. And if the Giants receivers are not back, like that's a guy playing a full-time role in a game that has like a pretty decent total, high-paced. I think 3K is probably, I think Pettis is like the last guy you could go to potentially in cash. And I know Bateman's actually in the rostership projections, actually Jared Evans like brought up to me, like Bateman is like the 5th highest projected guy. Like people are all over Bateman, so I think it makes a lot of sense in cash.
Yeah, exactly. That's fine in cash. The only thing I would say with Pettis, we did have Darius Slayton practicing on Wednesday, and if he's going to be back at the table, that could throw off some of those splits we had last week. Always got to consider his injuries, but Andrew, that's why we talk every Friday night about the injuries and like to shore everything up there. At tight end, our guy, Ricky Seals-Jones, a little more expensive this week. I still think he's fine if you can get up to him at 3,700, but we have a new leader in the clubhouse for cheapest usable tight end. His name is Cole Kmet. Season high, 6 targets, I believe, last week, almost even clicked 50 yards. And now we're facing a Buccaneers team that offenses just literally throw the ball against more than any other team, even removing garbage time situations, because everyone knows they cannot run the ball on this group. So we can't assume rational coaching, particularly from Mr. Matt Nagy and the Chicago Bears. It does seem like a situation where Fields, for the first time in his career, could have a pass attempt number starting with a 3. His full-time tight end should be able to get there. So Jimmy Graham still has a no-trade clause and still steals away some level of snaps. He only has 1 catch this year, though. Like, Kmet is clearly their guy. I think I even saw like Jimmy Graham's a captain for this team. Like I don't even, that whole situation blows my mind every time I think about it. So I think Kmet at 3K makes sense. If you really want to get gross, truly gross, Ryan Griffin at 2,500 can actually be okay for you because Tyler Kroft is dealing with a back injury, I believe, looking fairly unlikely to be out there in low key in that horrific London game that I hope you all slept in a couple weeks ago instead of watching. We saw Griffin post an elite 91% snap rate. He had 2 targets, 1 catch for 4 yards. Like when we've talked about these low-priced tight ends, Andrew, we had James O'Shaughnessy in week 2. We had Ricky Seals-Jones a few weeks later. They were guys that we felt more confident in could like actually make do with these targets. Like I do not blame anyone for wanting nothing to do with Ryan Griffin. I had to watch this guy play ahead of Chris Herndon for a long time, and I'm not even saying like he's a bad player, but he is like the epitome of if you throw him a pass in the end zone and there's no one covering him, okay, he'll get you a touchdown. Do not expect this guy to pull off anything over expectation in terms of what his target share ends up being. He still has a 0-point floor is what I'm trying to say, despite having these fairly high snap rates, at least for last week. So Andrew, are you leaning towards Kmet this week? What's your overall thought here on Cash Game tight end?
Yeah, I love Kmet. He's the first guy that kind of popped out to me. He ranks really high in terms of routes run per dropback, 9th in the NFL. So he's running a route on over 70% of Justin Fields' dropbacks. And that's like a marquee number. Like that's up with the stud tight end. So that's why I feel confident with Kmet. Like I'm not concerned that he's just some guy off the street. Like we're just kind of throwing and be like, oh, it's a good matchup. Like hopefully it works. But no, it is a good matchup and he's getting the usage and he's coming off a week where he saw some involvement. So I think he makes a ton of sense. And it's actually funny you mentioned Jimmy Graham. You know, I was rewatching that Bears game and Jimmy Graham ran a route, you know, on the touchdown catch by Darnell Mooney, and he runs into the end zone and the entire defense like goes to Jimmy Graham. So Darnell Mooney's just wide open in the end zone. I'm like, I guess like that's his role. Like he's just like the end zone guy that teaches like, oh no, he's in the game. Like he's going to get the ball. So yes, we're going to start Kmet. So Jimmy Graham will most definitely catch a touchdown in this matchup. Unfortunately, the only other tight end that is also cheap, that's actually cheaper than Kmet at 2,800 is Jonnu Smith. So he's really been playing behind Hunter Henry for the most part. Like actually 2 weeks ago, he ran less routes than N'Keal Harry in a game. It was not good.
6 routes in a full game.
It was very bad. And the routes only jumped up a little bit last week. It just, the percentage looks a lot more significant because they didn't really throw that much last week, but they did increase. So his snaps went up last week. And when he is on the field, like he's getting targeted. He has the highest target rate per route run of any tight end. Now, it's obviously a smaller sample size because he's not running that many routes, but the matchup is really good. The Jets are 4th in terms of fantasy points allowed to tight ends. We saw his routes run increase. So I think that, 29% target rate per route run is really, really high. So he's not going to give you a 0 because he does get targets when he's on the field. It's just we don't necessarily know how often he's going to run routes, but he's 2,800. I still want to get Kmet at 3K, but if for some reason like you just cannot find that extra 200 or you're trying to get different, I think Kmet might be a little bit more popular. Maybe in tournaments, Jonnu Smith. I mean, he just has to catch a touchdown, and he's playing the Jets. So I think that Smith is a pretty decent option, especially because Henry might be more popular.
All good points. I think on defense, you can get away with the Giants at 2,500, Jets at 2,400, Eagles at 2,300 are fine enough as well. Even Washington at 2,200. I know Washington's been terrible, but their pass rush is back. They're number 2 now in the league in pressure rate. And when you look beyond, the kind of passing yards they're giving up and the touchdown. Like they've given up, I believe, the highest passing touchdown rate in the league. That's a number we would just expect to come back to earth. And I believe they're a top 5 defense in like contested target percentage. So they face some really good quarterbacks. They're facing Aaron Rodgers. They're going to continue to face some really good quarterbacks. I'm not saying they're a good defense. We have, solved that. Washington football team does not have this great juggernaut defense we expected. I will say I don't think they are the worst defense like their rank in scoring denotes them as. I think there's some more along a below average defense compared to a great one. Why do we care? I mean, compared to a terrible one. And that's just because they're ranked as the 4th worst defense of this week. So you could do worse there. Andrew, I think the pretty much shell we've got here now, Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson. I think it probably is Hurts, after going through and seeing the guys we can get up to elsewhere. But we'll go with Jalen Hurts at QB. Derrick Henry and Darrell Henderson, RB1, RB2. Devontae Adams and Rashod Bateman, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Cole Kmet at tight end. And from there, again, get one of those cheap defenses, and you got a lot of options with that final wide receiver spot and the flex. Miles Sanders, Sterling Shepard, just a lot of guys around that stretch that I think make a lot of sense. So, as always, tune in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast Saturday morning, Friday night, and we will go through all the injuries that inevitably throw a big wrench in this sort of strategy we're talking through at this point in time. Let's talk tournaments now, Andrew. Trying to win the $1 million, trying to beat hundreds of thousands of other people. We got to get a little bit tricky here. What are you thinking at quarterback? Who are you trying to center some of these lineups around that? Hey, why couldn't the overall point total start with a 3? Let's get crazy.
I mean, it's not crazy because I just love Matthew Stafford in the spot against the Detroit Lions. I just think that it's a really obvious spot. I mean, I even thought Stafford was a good cash play, honestly. Like, you look at his numbers, and he doesn't have a game this season where he scored less than 18 fantasy points. So he's been super consistent despite the fact that he's not a mobile quarterback. He's not a rusher. But I mean, how do you see him failing in this match? I mean, the Lions rank dead last in basically every efficiency metric for giving up to other quarterbacks. So, like, their raw numbers aren't like necessarily that bad. Like, if you look at like total touchdowns, total passing yards, it's not necessarily indicative of how bad they are in defense. It's all about the rate, like passer rating dead last, explosive pass play rate dead last, yards per attempt dead last. Like, I don't see how Matthew Stafford doesn't throw for at least 4 touchdowns in this game or throw for 300 yards. So, I mean, I love him in this spot. Again, he's not the most popular quarterback on the slate because of Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Like, because there's a lot of good quarterbacks of the high tier that are priced up and in good spots. I mean, Kyler Murray's playing the Houston freaking Texans. Like, you think he's going to score fantasy points in that game too. So, I do think that Matthew Stafford might, hover around that 10% ownership, and I think that's fine in tournaments, especially in like some small field stuff where you're just shooting for the ceiling. And it's really easy to obviously stack him with Cooper Kupp. I think that Tyler Higbee is in a really good spot as well at tight end. I mean, you can even play him with Darrell Henderson. Like, I mean, Darrell Henderson is involved in the past. Darrell Henderson caught a touchdown last week. Like, that was a good combination between those two players. So Matthew Stafford as like a pay up quarterback, I still really like a lot. And I think that, quarterback ownership is usually pretty flat across the board anyway, so I don't think you necessarily need to get off of him because, he's super obvious. It's like, well, there's like a lot of good quarterback plays that you can play this week, and I think Stafford the implied team total is great, and Stafford has just been dynamite. And this is a game where, Sean McVay may want Stafford to be able to throw like 6 touchdowns against the Lions. Like, it's like, hey man, just go have fun. Like, do whatever you want. Like, just blow him out. And we can see that he could throw for 200 yards and like 6 touchdowns. So I want to be part of it. I don't want to miss out on Stafford this week.
You got to have some pretty big balls to not stack Stafford with Cooper Kupp. But I think after that, you can like get a little quirky. You don't need to just go Kupp and Woods. You can do Higbee, as you said, who still has the every down usage. We just haven't quite seen him have that, 8 to 9 target game where he gets a bunch of success. And also, man, like if you're gonna, again, this would be a situation to throw a dart at Van Jefferson or Deshaun Jackson. Lions are one of only 4 defenses to allow over 20 yards per pass attempt on passes thrown at least 20 yards downfield this season. We have our J.D. McKissick even number week trend going. Don't look now, Andrew, but Deshaun Jackson is slowly making a name for himself on the odd number weeks. Had 2 catches in week 1, 120 yards in his score in week 3. And he had a 68-yard catch against the Seahawks on that Thursday night game back in week 5. So, yeah, he's quiet. Until he's not, he's still out there for, up to 20 snaps a game. And again, if there is going to be a time to get quirky, it is in these tournament settings. I would say, and also you can loop that back around with Amon-Ra St. Brown or DeAndre Swift on the other side. So I do like that call. I think that Tom Brady and these pass catches for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are always a solid, DraftKings tournament option. We can also loop that back around with Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, some of those guys I think we'll talk about a little bit later. We want to talk about usage going the right direction. Look at Allen Robinson, people. Most unrealized air yards in a week this year in week 6. Hopefully we can get that turned around. But yeah, Brady, Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown, stack that to your heart's desire. And I just think at 7,700, people are probably going to be getting up to Mahomes or Kyler a little bit more than him. And honestly, same thing with Aaron Rodgers sitting there at 7,500. Like, we're just seeing this small tier in the mid 7,500 range where why pay up more when you can get Lamar Jackson and all that rushing ability? And yeah, I would start Lamar over Brady and Rodgers in a season-long league. There's no reason why those guys can't outscore him in 1 week, particularly against this Washington football team defense. It is a little bit surprising to see Rodgers potentially going under the radar in a game at Lambeau against a defense that, again, I just got done talking about isn't quite as bad as we think. But come on, like, what defense can't hold Rodgers under 303 tutties at home when everything is clicking right for him? And if you want to talk about like legit quarterbacks we can stack with the running backs, it'll be expensive, but Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Adams I think could be a fairly high upside lineup that I don't think too many people are going to be actively going after in these sort of tournaments. Finally, what about Joe Burrow here, Andrew? We've talked about Boyd a little bit, and if you look at the Bengals' pass game volume, they have started to throw the ball a little bit more often, even in neutral situations over the past few weeks. And one of the cooler stats I found during my week of research is how good Burrow has been against the blitz this year. 6 touchdowns, only 1 pick. He's one of 7 quarterbacks averaging over 10 yards per attempt. I believe overall PFF passing grade, only Kyler Murray has been better against the blitz. Baltimore Ravens just so happen to blitz at the 3rd highest frequency in the league. So if we want to look at a potential, contrarian stack here, Andrew, Boyd, Burrow, maybe even Higgins, and hope for once that Jamar Chase doesn't ball out. I'm not sure if that's possible, but hey, man, weird things have happened.
Yeah, no, the trying to get away from Chase is so difficult. I mean, because he's just so efficient. Like that's his game. Like you look at him and the expected fantasy points, like it's super, super low. It's like, oh, this guy can't keep this up. It's like, oh no, it just means he's really, really good. Like that's literally what it's telling you. That's what the chart is telling you. It's not, oh, he's primed for regression. It's like this is just his game. Like he's just this elite deep ball threat that Joe Burrow did not have last year. He was throwing all these balls to AJ Green last year, and now they're kind of finally converting because they're going to Jamar Chase. No, I agree. I think Joe Burrow makes a ton of sense. I think this game has a chance to be more fast-paced than people will give it credit. Baltimore is a top 10 in terms of pace of play, and Cincinnati has increased their plays per game significantly over the last 2 weeks. The first 4 weeks they were at 30. They were last. They were dead last in the league because they were just basically just giving the ball to Joe Mixon. Last 2 weeks, if you exclude overtime, they rank 17th. So it's starting to increase. And I know you mentioned the blitz statistics. Joe Burrow is also really good against the coverages that the Baltimore Ravens run. Cover 1, cover 3. Burrow is PFF's highest graded quarterback against those schemes. So I've gotten a lot of questions this week and season long about, do I start Joe Burrow? And I get it because, the Ravens shut down Justin Herbert last week. We were like, we were expected that game to shoot out and it didn't. But I think Burrow has just shown us that, he's an every week start. Like he's an efficient quarterback. And once you reach the point of this guy is legit. Like you can't weigh defensive matchups really because it just doesn't matter. Like all quarterbacks see the same opportunity for the most part, and it's really about the efficiency that drives quarterback production in fantasy football, except for the guys that pick up yards with the ground. But I think Burrow is going to have an efficient passing game. I think this game could definitely shoot out. So I do like Burrow, and also, I mean, it's got to be Justin Fields. Like this has to be the week that he finds. I mean, everything is set up for him to have an above average passing game. We finally saw him run last week. So 5,300. I'm not missing the Justin Fields breakout game when he's this cheap. So again, he's really easy to stack with bringing back Bucks players. We know exactly who the ball's going to. It's going to Allen Robinson, going to Mooney, going to Kmet. So Fields, I'm telling people to start Fields in season-long leagues. I'm bearing down, Ian. I'm bearing down on these Bears. So pray for me, please.
Bear down, man. Well, we had that millionaire winner a couple years ago, win the whole thing, and their name was Bears fan, and their entire lineup was full of Bears. Mitch Trubisky goes absolutely bonkers against the Buccaneers. Yeah, it must have been a hell of a Sunday for that dude, that's for sure. Final point here on quarterback. Again, we're just trying to leverage away from what everyone else is doing in these tournaments. So when we look at our PFF rostership projections, who are the top four? Only 4 running backs with projected rostership over 15%. Aaron Jones, Darrell Henderson, Darrell Williams, and Derrick Henry. I don't think Patrick Mahomes is sneaking up on anyone this week, but Ryan Tannehill, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, those could be good ways of, hey, still getting a good player in a good situation that all of a sudden people are sleeping on just a little bit more because so many of them are building their lineup around the running back when the passing game in reality probably has just as good of a chance of going off. Andrew, I appreciate one thing about you, especially today, and that is including my guy, Cordero Patterson, in GPPs as one of your preferred plays. With that said, though, man, I kind of like Mike Davis. Why not both of these Falcons running backs, though? Come on, because they are facing a Dolphins defense where, I guess I went before when we were talking about these matchups, like the Dolphins aren't the complete smash spot Lions of the week or anything like that. But it's just one running back after another. Week 1, Damien Harris finishes as the RB22. Week 2, Devin Singletary, RB13. Zach Moss, RB11. We got an RB6 performance from Peyton Barber next week. Jonathan Taylor, RB10. Leonard Fournette and James Robinson ripped off top 14 finishes over the past 2 weeks. So the Dolphins, man, it's supposed to be a little bit rainy in Miami around kickoff. Keep an eye on those wind speeds as well. I just feel like if this team is as bad as they have looked over the past few weeks, maybe both C-Pat and Mike Davis actually could make the most out of their probably 15 to 20 combined carries and targets each.
I think they're both strong plays. I listed them as both starts this week in the start-em sit-em column that I did. And the thing with Patterson is I just think that the field doesn't know what to do with him. And the reason I'm kind of going in the rostership projection degree, both these guys are at sub 5%. And I've been actually following, now that I'm the props prophet, I've been following these player prop lines a little bit closer. Like I check them and kind of see like Cordell Patterson's line like moves up and down all the time because people like don't know how to approach his lines. Like people are just like at first his rushing yards props at like 40, and then it's down to 30. Now it's back up to 36. Like people don't know how to view Cordero Patterson because he's such a unicorn this season. He's obviously not even saying that he's a running back. He's a football player. Like that's his position. He's a football player. He's bringing back to the Denard Robinson days when it was offensive weapon for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I just think C-Pat, I'm going to ride the wave, man. Until like I see the Falcons get away from using him, like I'm going to believe that they're going to continue to use him. He had 21 touches the last time he hit the field. I know Ridley didn't play in that game, and that probably had to do with the increase in touches. But, I mean, the guy's target rate per route run is second to only Devontae Adams. Like, when he's on the field, he gets the rock, and he's explosive. So I still think people are just gun-shy on Patterson because they're like, oh, it's like not sustainable. Like, we're afraid. It's like, oh, well, what if he comes out and, like, has, like, a 75% snap share and, like, plays full-time receiver and plays running back at the same time? Like, are they going to put Russell Gage back on the field? Like, really? I think that there's a lot to gain, and especially because the matchup is so good against the Miami Dolphins. So I think this game, has a chance to sneaky shootout, and C-Pat is a guy that's just being underlooked. And I mean, he's a top 5 running back or top 10 running back, and he already has bye week.
Like you said, sub 5%, you can talk yourself certainly into anyone that is that talented in a good matchup projected for double-digit carries and targets. I do think Gage and Ridley are going to cut down on Patterson's true receiver usage, but I don't know if that's necessarily even going to hurt his overall touch count when it's all said and done. So good points there. Michael Carter, I do think is someone where, hey, we saw this. Doesn't work all the time. It happened last year, kind of, where DeAndre Swift came back from his bye, had a really big game against the Jaguars, and then we kept expecting the same thing to happen for Gibson, for Taylor. The idea that an offense will more fully go to the rookie running back following a bye, I think it makes sense, and we do see examples of it. It's just not a guarantee. So Michael Carter is, I think, the single cheapest running back. Where is he priced at? Yeah, 4,800. Yeah, single cheapest starting running back, and that should mean something. So, no, I don't think the Zach Wilson and the Jets implied for 17.75 points this week. Last time I checked, they're going to have too much success against the Patriots. But if there is someone to roster on the Jets side of things, it is certainly him. Andrew, I got a trio of running backs, though, in the mid 5K range. We talked about Mike Davis a little bit already and his touch counts. Truly one of the only players in the league this year with 15 touches in every single game he's played in. We got Damien Harris, 5.7K, as the bell cow, man. What is it with Ramondre Stevenson that people are waiting for? The breakout would have happened last week. It would have happened when Harris was playing more banged up with the chest and rib injuries. And I think it would have happened after Harris was coming off his second pretty much backbreaking fumble of the year, which occurred in week 5. So yeah, I saw Stevenson. He got the goal line touchdown when Harris hobbled off. Harris came back in overtime. He remains the guy that's going to see 20 touches. If you're just by a get-in and you have nowhere else to turn, okay, maybe you can put Stevenson in there and hope he makes the most out of like 6 to 8 touches. But the idea that Harris is anything other than the bell cow of really this entire offense, that's the part I don't get. He turned in a reasonably well enough performance when they played in week 2, had that beast mode touchdown run of like 30 yards where he carried like 3 guys into the end zone. I just think that, again, this spot, league's single worst defense in PPR points per game allowed to running backs is the New York Jets. I do think Damien Harris presents some upside. And how about $100 cheaper? Man, it's going to sound scary to say, Andrew, but James Conner at 5.6K. We're a double-digit home favorite. We just saw what happened last week when they get up right now. With Chase Edmonds dealing with a shoulder injury, he'll play, he'll start, he'll get some good receiving stuff, but they are not going to give him more touches than he needs. So James Conner is in one of the highest implied scoring offenses of the week, seemingly going pretty far under the radar. I know our rostership stuff has him at 10.8. I've seen a little bit lower across the industry, but if there is a week to ever get behind Damien Harris and James Conner, Andrew, it's when they're set up in these sort of brilliant situations as a touchdown or more home favorite.
I think that makes a ton of sense. It sucks that we're seeing Chase Edmonds and James Conner at the same price. They're both at 5.6K, and I almost feel like I just want to play who like is less rostered. Like that's kind of the guy I want to go towards and just try to, because yeah, it makes perfect sense logically that it would be a James Conner week. You know, the Cardinals get up big, they give him the ball. I mean, Chase Edmonds barely played in the second half of last week's game because they were just in cruise control and they didn't need to test him. But I also know like James Conner is tied with Tony Pollard for the lead in yards per carry this year at 6.0. So I know that he could literally touch the ball 10 times and rush for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like I know I know Edmonds has that in his range of outcomes, especially against the Texans. So I think, yeah, it's really important to get exposure to both of these Cardinals running backs. I mean, you got to get some exposure to the Cardinals in some way, shape, or form. Like they're going to score 30 points against the Texans. So you got to figure out, and the only way you're safe is if it's just so flat across the board and no one actually does well because it's so evenly spread out. Like that's kind of what you're hoping for if you're trying to fade Arizona. But I mean, the running backs just seem like they're going to have just such productive days.
Yeah, I mean, already this year, Conner has had games with 16 carries in week 1, 18 carries in week 4, 16 in week 6. They just feed him the ball. They do it at the goal line regardless of what the score is. But when they get up, they just keep on pounding this guy. And again, if we can get 15 to 20 touches as a massive home favorite in a great offense, like just if you just removed everything you knew about James Conner and you were just looking at these like price tags and usage projections as like player 1, player 2, player 3, I think people will be a lot higher on James Conner than they are right now. Andrew, happy Robby Anderson week. Is this it? Is this finally the time when we get it? 4.8K. He's been top 11 wide receivers in air yards and targets ever since the squeaky wheel started needing that grease 3 weeks ago. Terrace Marshall, I didn't see his practice participation on Wednesday. I think he might still be in the concussion protocol. Either way, man, there's no McCaffrey coming back. Okay, he did sit out Wednesday, so that's even more condensed target share. We're coming off the drops. We still know Robby is a good guy. Come on, man. Why can't this be the week with James Bradbury and company paying more attention to DJ Moore anyway?
I'm out on Robby. I played Robby last week. I played him last week.
That's not a reason not to play him this week. You know that?
I played him the last 3 weeks when he was a squeaky wheel, when he saw I mean, that's the thing. Like, it'd be one thing if he wasn't seeing like opportunities, but he is, and he's just not. He's not been efficient. He's PFF's worst graded wide receiver this year. Worst graded wide receiver with 20 targets is Robby Anderson. And again, yeah, the drops have been a big issue, but it's been more than that. He just hasn't been efficient on a per target basis. Like he's not getting like. I just have a lot of reservations about Robby Anderson. It's different from like when Brandon Cooks like put up that goose egg and then he immediately like bounced back. It's like this is a constant thing. Like he's been bad all year long with Sam Darnold. Like I just don't know if that's going to change. Now, I really think that targets are just going to concentrate more on DJ Moore. Like that's kind of really my take on how this Carolina Panthers offense is going to operate. And I also think that they're going to try to run the football more. I mean, Matt Rule already come out and said like we need to reestablish the run game with Chuba Hubbard. I think Hubbard's actually really interesting in this game, and I think it's going to be the DJ Moore show. Maybe they get the tight ends more involved, but I can't imagine that they go back and review the tape and be like, yeah, we got to get the ball to Robby Moore. It's like they've been doing that the last 3 weeks and they've lost their last 3 games. Like that's the issue. So I'm out. I'm Robby, unfortunately.
Well, That's just like your opinion, man, going on with that. Yeah, it wasn't good last week. You know who else dropped 3 balls, though? DJ Moore. And I know DJ did make a little bit better use out of it. I guess, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. If we're not getting the yards, we're not getting the yards, and that is that. But if you just look at air yards from incompletions that were the quarterback's fault, good old prayer yards, both DJ Moore and Robby Anderson are in the top 5. So, yeah, Sam Darnold kind of has turned back into a pumpkin. Funny how that works. A couple other guys I do like in the 5K range. Corey Davis at 5.2K. He's just the epitome of a boomer bust tournament receiver. He has 2 finishes as a top 12 receiver this year. His other 3, I believe he ranked outside the top 50. So if you have Corey Davis in your lineup, you're either feeling fantastic about it when the game's over or like shit. But first or last should kind of be our general mentality in tournaments as it is. And I think Davis does reflect that. And similar things with Henry Ruggs and Devontae Smith. Like, give me those guys that have just the potential to rack up 250 air yards in the best case scenario over Sterling Shepard, Jacoby Myers, who are fine in cash, and that's not a problem. I know that they have the higher target ceiling and the higher floor, but I want the ceiling. I want the freaking Henry Ruggs comes down with all 3 of his deep ball targets, not Jacoby Myers hopefully scores the first touchdown of his freaking life, seemingly at this point. So Ruggs and Smith are right there. Finally, Andrew, last guy I want to go on before I throw it over to you. Terry McLaurin, 6.9K, facing a Green Bay Packers secondary, still without their 2 starting cornerbacks in Jair Alexander and Kevin King. We can argue if having Kevin King out there would be better, but either way, don't have Jair. And the only players with 50-plus targets since week 2, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, and DJ Moore. I feel like Terry is getting penalized for having the late week hamstring thing when you look at what happened last week, and he really didn't. I know he didn't have the best game, but like watching it, if you didn't tell me before that he had a hamstring issue, I don't know that I would have noticed. He played 95% of the offensive snaps. He had 8 targets. Like, there was absolutely 0 reduction in his playing time. And again, I think the eye test told me that he's pretty good. And we even saw, I believe it was Ron Rivera himself, talk about how they were just being more careful with Terry than anything, and it wasn't quite as big of a deal as everyone made it out to be. So only players with at least 50 targets since week 2, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, and Terry McLaurin. So don't sleep on him at 6.9K. I understand you're not building, your entire lineup around him, but everyone wants to get up 200 more bucks to DJ Moore or go down 300 to Calvin Ridley. I think McLaurin, out of those guys, might just have the best matchup and the higher target ceiling. Are you in on Terry, Andrew? Come on.
Yeah, he makes a lot of sense. It's really been like him, OBJ, Allen Robinson, like they've all had just really bad quarterback play the last couple of weeks. Like Heineke's just not hitting him like he was like a little bit during the beginning of the season. And like, of course, this is why we liked Fitzpatrick. That was like the move behind McLaurin. It's like all these guys we expected to have the best quarterbacks, the best quarterback play ever, just like did not pan out. They all just still have terrible quarterback play. And it's just, they're not overcoming it because it's hard to do. Like, we almost take it for granted that Allen Robinson can just overcome any quarterback and McLaurin can just overcome any quarterback. And I think you made up this point when we talked in the offseason that, maybe they were just kind of running pure and, they were just all the contested catches. It's just not something that's really sustainable. And that's kind of what we're kind of seeing now a little bit with some of these guys not producing as often as we expect them to. So, no, but I mean, it makes sense with the matchup against the Packers. They're going to have to throw, and the Packers don't have, really that much in their secondary. So I think a skinny stack, McLaurin, Devontae Adams makes a ton of sense in tournaments. For me, I mean, AJ Brown is not getting a lot of buzz. I know that Chipotle hates him now. They're not a fan of AJ Brown anymore, which honestly, I don't disagree. Like, I don't disagree, man. But I mean, 31% target shares to coming back from the injury, and he gets the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, we know Derrick Henry's chalk. And we know the Chiefs are going to be chalk, and this is the guy that you want to play in that matchup. Like, we know he's an alpha wide receiver. We don't know what Julio Jones, what his status is going to be. So we know the targets are going to A.J. Brown. Like, eventually, Derrick Henry's not going to be able to score all the touchdowns. Like, eventually. I think that the other players will have to score at some point. So an A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill stack makes a lot of sense if you don't play Derrick Henry. You can play Derrick Henry in that lineup too, but if you really want to capitalize on the Derrick Henry chalk, I think A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill makes a lot of sense from a roster construction. Chris Godwin is kind of fallen to the wayside. Like, he's cheaper than Antonio Brown and Mike Evans now, but I think the matchup actually favors him the most. We look at the Chicago Bears slot funnel defense, allow the third most receiving yards to slot wide receivers. I mean, Chris Godwin's still seeing like pretty good usage. He still has a lot of end zone targets. He just hasn't really he hasn't caught any touchdowns. Like, that's been his issue. Like, he has not capitalized, and we know he's a guy that can score 3 touchdowns like that. Like, I'm not concerned about him. So 5,900 Chris Godwin, like a guy that has been a top 2 fantasy wide receiver this cheap, under 6K. I want to play a guy that's priced down there. And then, I mean, we've already talked to him a bunch.
And just real quick on Godwin, I think that's a great call. We should be seeing, I think, Jalen Johnson, who has really been making guys work for it in his shadow covers this year, will probably be on Mike Evans. And yeah, teams just really have been fine attacking the Bears over the middle time and time again. And the way they use Godwin, man, he can get these jet sweeps randomly. He'll get these kind of cool design plays for him around the goal line because of where they line him up as. I mean, I saw someone replied to one of my tweets about it saying he's like the modern day Hines Ward, which I thought was a great comp because he does so much for this offense. This year, Chris Godwin has lined up as a blocking inline tight end for 9 snaps. Mike Gesicki has done that 4 times. Give Chris Godwin tight end eligibility or we riot. It's not any more ridiculous than it is with Mike Gesicki having it, but okay, continue, Andrew.
That would be epic. Just slide Chris Godwin to the tight end slot.
It's not any different than freaking Gesicki. Like, he should not be invited to National Tight End Day, man. 16 snaps as a tight end this year, 234 as a wide receiver. Like, you can call him a very good football player, but I take offense to it when you call him a tight end, and that's my final argument about that.
Calvin Ridley, I do want to mention him. I know that it's been a while since we've seen Calvin Ridley. We're like, he's on the milk cart, and we're like, Calvin Ridley, where are you? You know, he missed the last game they played. They had their bye week, but I mean, he still leads the team in air yards and targets despite missing a game. His peripherals are really great. Top 10 target rate per route run, 4th in expected fantasy points per game, and Matt Ryan's starting to play better. Like, Matt Ryan, they're starting to have him throw the ball downfield. Like, the first half of the season, in the first 3 weeks, he was basically just check down king. Like, that's all he was doing, just throwing it to Mike Davis, like, constantly. We're like, guys, like, this is not going to work as an efficient offense. So with Kyle Pitts now kind of like stepping up and now making it so defenses just can't focus on taking Calvin Ridley away, like, I like him in this spot against the Miami Dolphins. And I think that, you know, Rashod Bateman, this is something that I would shout out to Jared Evans. Nico Collins, I think, is the perfect pivot off of Rashod Bateman chalk, because when you look at the way that both of them were used last week, so both rookies coming off of injury. I know Nico Collins played a little bit earlier in the season and got hurt, but they were basically saw identical usage. Both saw 6 targets, both ran the same amount of routes per drop back in their offenses. And I mean, Nico Collins is $200 cheaper and has 1% rostership, whereas Bateman has 14%. And I think Bateman makes a lot of sense from a process standpoint. But he's also like a wide receiver, the third pass catching option potentially on a team that likes to run the football. I know they've been throwing a little bit more, but I mean, it would surprise no one if Rashod Bateman literally did nothing. So I think it makes a lot of sense to gain some leverage on an offense that we know Houston has to throw the ball. And they know that they're going to try to take away Brandon Cooks. So if you go on the other side, Nico Collins supplanted Chris Conley as the clear number 2 wide receiver on the Houston Texans. So we know Arizona doesn't really have like great cornerbacks. I mean, their defense has been okay, but they're better like up front than in their secondary. So I mean, Nico Collins is really interesting, and Jared Evans, me and him talked about it, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. That off of getting off of Rashod Bateman. I know that this is also a pro Nico Collins podcast as well.
Well, I was going to say, like, when Jared brings up Nico Collins, I was instantly like, okay, hold on. It's like when you bring up Deontay Harris, but when you brought up Deontay a couple weeks ago, you had a bunch of good reasons to also go with it. Not just, I like my guy Deontay, Jared with Nico. Yeah, be a fan of the guy. And when you're a fan of the guy and he actually is cheap, a nice pivot, week off the injury, we've verified that he does still have, you know, his full-time role. Yeah, I do think Nico Collins is a great pivot off of Rashod Bateman down the way. Love that call from you, Jared, whoever the hell came up with it from the beginning. Quickly at tight end, again, I do think Ryan Griffin, if you just want to get disgusting at 2.5K, is probably the cheapest. It is literally the cheapest you can go, and the only guy that I would sprinkle into even a lineup or two. Mike Gesicki, as much as I hate his positional designation, is only 4.7K. Just make sure that Devontae Parker remains out. I mean, one of my biggest misses right now in, you know, just what happened in August compared to now is Mike Gesicki, because I thought, hey, here's the guy that plays wide receiver. They added Jalen Waddle and Will Fuller. Seems like it's going to be tough for him to produce in that room. Well, you take away 2 of the starting 3 wide receivers, and all of a sudden the wide receiver we call a tight end does start producing. So I'll take my L there, and we'll try and make some money off it, because at 4.7K as the, you know, number 1 or number 2 pass game option in this offense, that is certainly too cheap. But it's going to be hard to really get up to Gesicki, because why not just just take Dallas Goedert at 4.6K. Should be at least 1,000 more, Andrew. I mean, this is like last week, I think, when we were looking at like Mark Andrews and Hawkinson, some of these guys just going like they are not going to be this cheap for much longer. So I think Goedert is the screaming value right there at 4.6K, where, you know, we got to see if he's going to be just the most chalky guy in the world. Then we got to consider pivoting. But for those that don't want to go all the way up to Kelsey or Waller at 4.6K, I think Goedert gives you the most upside per dollar.
Agreed. I think the matchup is good. Raiders have been the worst team against tight ends over the last 4 weeks, so I think that sets up really nice. Again, maybe people are just not sure like what his role will be. I mean, he was on the COVID list, so maybe things change in terms of his rostership projection. But I mean, we saw Zach Ertz get like elite fantasy usage without Goedert playing, so I would assume that we're going to see the same thing just in reverse with Goedert getting that usage. So I think that Goedert, you know, just a simple stack, even in tournament, Hurts and Goedert. That's all you need to do. You know, bring it back with the Ruggs or something like that. So I like the Eagles plays there. And the only other tight end I'll mention is just Kyle Pitts. I think it's sticker shock. I think that's kind of the thing. He's up to 5,900, but I mean, if you look at his usage, it's the same as all those other tight ends that are priced above him, as Mark Andrews, as a Darren Waller, as a Travis Kelce. Now, yeah, I get he's not as established as those guys as a rookie tight end, but we saw the breakout game. We finally saw him kind of put it all together. Now, okay, Calvin really didn't play in that game, so maybe that's why people are not as interested, but I think it makes a lot of sense if you're going to double stack Matt Ryan, who you know you can double stack with. You know exactly who to do it with. It's Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley. Like, those are the guys that you combine him with. Maybe you sprinkle in some CPAT in there as well. But I think Kyle Pitts makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's at 2% rostership, and I mean, we know he has slate breaking upside. And right now, we really haven't seen it from a lot of the tight ends. Like, Kelsey's kind of been like, he's been okay. Darren Waller really hasn't had a big week since week 1 when he had like 20 targets. And he's kind of just seen like 7 ever since then. Mark Andrews has obviously been good, but I think Pitts is cheaper than all those guys, and his usage warrants him probably being higher priced with those other players.
And I don't think we mentioned while talking about this Falcons passing game that the Dolphins maybe have the single best pair of cornerbacks when they're healthy and playing right. Both were out last week, so make sure you keep an eye on Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, because if they're both out again, good luck guarding Calvin Ridley. One of the things I reference a lot on this podcast are expected points, just, you know, removing the production from the equation, where we expect these players to be ranking based on the nature of their targets. And when you take fantasy points and subtract that from the expected points, you can see guys that might be due for a little thing called regression. Top 2 receivers that are tied for first, only guys above 21.3 expected fantasy points, Andrew, Calvin Ridley and Robby Anderson. So
one of those is not like the other.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, it was funny. Rich Rebar, love Rich. He's been on this pod several times. Does great things over at with Warren Sharp and their gig. But I sent out a tweet about Robby Anderson. Rich was like, you know, sometimes it's just like, it's your turn to take on this is the Robby Anderson week. At some point, you know, he'll bust this week. Another fantasy analyst in week 8 will say this is the week for Robby Anderson, and someone's going to be right eventually, and they will be the Robby Anderson king. But enough of that, Andrew. We've buried the lead enough. You are 7-2 on your Prize Point prop picks. I got Kyle Pitts in my mind now. Good point there. One last week on Joe Burrow passing yards over. I like the Damian Williams under call. Obviously, he got COVID and did not end up suiting up in that game, though. So what do you got for the people this week? Prop Profit, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I've got a couple ones up. So my first one is going to be over on Jameis Winston, 215 passing yards. He's facing the Seattle Seahawks, who have allowed over 225 passing yards to every single quarterback that they have faced so far this year. We started to see Jameis Winston throw the ball downfield a little bit more in the last couple of weeks. I know that the first 3 games was literally just hand the ball off to Alvin Kamara every single play, and I don't think that this game is going to be high scoring whatsoever. It definitely looks more like a slog on Monday Night Football than anything else, so maybe you go to bed early. But I mean, 215 passing yards is not a high number to get to. So Winston's done it the last 2 weeks, and I mean, he's throwing the ball deep. That's the thing that they are bringing back into this offense. He's chucking the ball deep downfield. He's got Deontay Harris, he's got Marquez Callaway, some downfield weapons. So, and the Seahawks can't cover. So I think that Jameis Winston over 215 passing yards makes a ton of sense. And then, because you got to live the under life. You can't just take overs on everything, even though that's more fun. Under on Nelson Aguilar, 3 receptions. Yes, I'm going against my own Patriots.
Wow.
Nelson Aguilar is right near Robby Anderson in terms of worst graded wide receivers this year. He's down there near the bottom. I mean, the drops are there. He's just not involved in this offense. Like, he's not getting targeted by Mac Jones. They're not throwing that much anyway. And like for him to see, I mean, I don't even know if he's going to see 3 targets in this game, let alone catch 3 of them. I mean, he has to catch 4 of them to hit the over on his 3 receptions. So I think Aguilar under 3. I mean, yeah, these aren't like the sexiest names, but hey, like, this is where you find value. Like, you look at these players that these lines line up, Aguilar 3, I'm like, that's too high. Like, for a guy that literally, I think I caught 0 passes last week, Nelson Aguilar under 3 receptions.
Robbie just continuing to catch strays from you, even as we get to the final minutes of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. It's a great point on Aguilar. When I was doing my weekly wide receiver cornerback article, which you can find on PFF.com, yeah, like last week was the first time he didn't technically get to start. And his snaps last 4 weeks, 81%, 73%, 67%, season low 59%. So Aguilar, usage going down. Yes, please take the under on 3 receptions. I mean, he's beaten that once all year. I don't see any reason why week 7 is going to be the time for everything to come together. Certainly thinking that's going to be more of a Damien Harris game. So that is going to be it, people. Under Nelson Aguilar, 3 receptions. Over Jameis Winston, 215 passing yards. You heard it from the prop prophet yourself. Andrew, great stuff today, my friend. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
I just need to ask you, Ian, about this $5,000 priced Rams DST. I forgot to mention that, dude. It's $5,000. Like, how much? Like, I don't know. Like, do you like pay up for that in any scenario? Like, again, they're not going to be hot popular because they're so expensive. But like, the Cardinals are 3,100, and they're playing Davis Mills. Like, the DraftKings salary is so buying into the revenge game narrative. Like, Jared Goff is better than Davis Mills. Like,
right?
It's mind-boggling.
Like, Goff has had some bad sack, but he's not like the quarterback you feel fine if your defense is facing Jared Goff, but like, think about it. We don't, like, when you pick a fantasy defense, you aren't necessarily trying to pick against the team that's going to score the least amount of points, because we get the most fantasy points on defense from defenses that are, wreaking havoc, getting sacks, interceptions. Goff hasn't thrown more than 1 interception in a game this year. He's lost some fumbles, but he's had, last week he only took 1 sack. He only took 1 sack against the Packers, a couple 4 sacks games in there. No, I can't rationalize paying that far up. I mean, the thing I always go back to, man, again, we just want the ones that are going to be facing more of a turnover prone quarterback. I go back to that 54-51 game when the Rams defense finished like the week as a top 5 unit, even though they gave up 51 points to Patrick Mahomes, because Mahomes can be someone that does take a few more chances. So Goff, like, I think when Aaron Donald's rushing down on Goff, he's not trying to be a hero. He's not doing things that would cause the turnovers in the first place. He's just throwing the ball, 20 yards short of the sticks and not doing anything for his offense. So.
Who do you think is priced higher, Jared Goff or the Rams defense?
Oh my God, is it actually the Rams defense?
They're the same price.
Oh my gosh, that would have been too funny. DraftKings does this stuff sometimes. I wish they would really go all in on the trolls.
Dude, someone needs to show this to Jared Goff and be like, dude, your price is the defense you're facing this week. Come on, man. Get it together. Let's go. Revenge game. Come on.
People, if you've liked what you've heard, if you want to go use some of these DFS tools for yourself, Lineup Optimizer, DFS rostership projections, just want to read certain pieces like Andrew's weekly DFS breakdown that is behind a paywall, all you got to do is use code FANTASY for 25% off any PFF subscription. Again, you're getting all locked article content, projections, rankings, betting dashboard, strength of schedule. I can guarantee you will find your money's worth in under a month if all you do is use code FANTASY, again, for 25% off any PFF subscription. Support the pod, support Andrew, support me, support your wallet by using promo code FANTASY for 25% off any sub. And also, NFL fans hungry for a big win this week, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, has you covered. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win this game, win their game, and if they do, you win $200 in free bets. Winner, chicken dinner. It's that simple. And just as, some super sharp advice to give you, should probably pick, one of these 2 touchdown home favorites like the Cardinals or like the Rams if you want to go ahead and take advantage of this offer. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and win $200 in free bets. If they win, you win with promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. 1 per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And also, whether it's football, success, or financial savvy, the right questions help set the stage for winning strategies. Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Want to hear about Chris's old playing days or behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Now you can ask about either or both, and every football or financial question you ask earns you a chance to win a catered party for February's big game. Check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that is westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, with Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. Finally, it's football season. You know what that means. It means we're going for two here with the sponsors of today's show. Manscaped, blitzing through hairs has never been easier, and it's time for you to join 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code PFF at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. Throwing out the window with all other trimmers. Again, 20% off and free shipping with the promo code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PFF. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Everyone, we'll be back with an injury breakdown before the games on Sunday. And also, if you want some start-sit advice, you can go reach out to myself or Andrew Erickson on the old Twitter sphere. We'll do our best to get all your questions answered. So for Andrew, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.